All right, today we're talking about a new topic, how to learn to love middle life. For those of you who are maybe in that phase of life or heading towards it or just beyond it, I think this will be a relevant topic for you. My guest today is Chip Conley. I'll tell you more about him in a second, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show. You know, each week I get to talk to interesting CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs from all kinds of different companies. We've had Netflix, Grubhub, Redfin, Gusto, Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, lots of great episodes. Go check out the archives. And we've had lots of different speakers and authors on different topics. Today's topic is a really interesting one and not one that you see covered very often. So my guest here today, first of all, before I get to him, I have to thank Tony Lilios, who's a past guest on my podcast. He's a personal professional coach. Check out his website at lilios.com. Great guy, told a great story about his life journey. But he introduced me to today's guest, who is Chip Conley. And you've probably seen him interviewed before. He is the co-founder and executive chairman of MEA, Modern Elder Academy. He previously founded Joie de Vivre Hospitality. We've got a bunch of those in my area. I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I'm very familiar with it, but it became the second largest boutique hotel brand in the US. And then in 2013, he became the head of global hospitality and strategy at Airbnb, where he mentored the founders and helped shape the company's culture during a period of rapid growth. And then that led to his interest in middle life, creating a midlife wisdom school. Sorry, I got to get that right. Midlife wisdom school, which is campuses, a couple of different campuses, Baja and Santa Fe, I believe it is. And so we're going to talk about that. But Chip, I wanted to start, now you've done interviews on all kinds of different topics, but I wanted to start with your experience at Airbnb, because that's what really inspired the current phase of what you're focused on now. And you had an experience where you had started your hotel at a young age. You were pretty young. And so you're the young buck doing it for many years. And then you were brought into Airbnb when Airbnb was still a much smaller company to mentor the founders there. And then all of a sudden someone refers to you as an elder. What did that feel like?
Yeah, so it's great to be here, John. Thank you for inviting me. And I started Joie de Vivre when I was 26 years old. So to be CEO of a boutique hotel company at that age was quite unusual. And then growing it to 52 boutique hotels, I was always perceived as way ahead of my age in terms of what I was doing. And then, I sold the company, and it's a Hyatt brand now called JDV, and had a couple of years off. And at age 52 was asked by the founders of Airbnb 12 years ago to come in and help their little tech startup become a global hospitality brand. And within the first month, they started calling me their modern elder. And I was like, well, what the hell is that? You're making fun of my age. And they said, well, let's recognize you're 52 and the average age here is 26. So you are, relatively speaking, older than other people. And an elder is older than the people around them. But then they said the thing that really got me that I loved. They said, Chip, we think a modern elder is someone who's as curious as they are wise. They don't have all the answers. Sometimes they ask really great questions. And you're 52 and you've never been in a tech company before. So sometimes you're learning something from us, but most of the time we're learning something from you. And that defined my 7.5 years at Airbnb, where we took this little tech startup and turned it into the most valuable hospitality company in the world.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I didn't mind the modern elder label once I understood their logic behind it, which was to say someone who's a modern elder it's not about just revering them. It's not about reverence. It's more about relevance and that combination of curiosity and wisdom.
Did it take a while for you to get your footing in Airbnb, to figure out where you fit in, just floating around that scene?
I think the hardest thing for me, John, it was really twofold. One was I was CEO for my own company for 24 years, and now I am the CEO whisperer. Whispering to Brian Chesky, the CEO, who was 21 years younger than me, and I was reporting to him. So that was hard, to go from CEO to all of a sudden whispering to the CEO. sometimes feeling like I knew a lot more than the CEO, but didn't want to sort of pull rank and, based upon being the older one with more experience. So I had to learn that. I also had to learn the tech business. Airbnb was a tech company. It was full of
Hmm.
techies, and I had no background in tech at all. So the combination of those two things required me to be open to learning, and that was good, but it did mean in the first couple months, I had to get really comfortable that this was going to feel very transitional for me. This was not what I was used to. And I think that was helpful because, quite frankly, by the time you're 52, especially if you've been running a company for 24 years, been in the same industry for, most of your career, you could be bored. You could be sort of like, think you can't learn anything new. And that's, unfortunately, it puts you into a death spiral in terms of losing curiosity, losing an interest in learning.
Yeah. There must have been moments where working at Airbnb where everyone kind of turned to you or, you had to kind of gauge, should I offer an opinion here? Would I be undermining Brian if I offer this opinion now? Should I hold on to it, tell him later? I mean, that just navigating those dynamics can be quite complex.
Well, to actually be mentoring my boss, which was technically what was happening,
Yeah.
I was his mentor, but I was reporting to him, meant we had to deeply build a relationship that had a lot of trust in it. And so I had to be very careful about what I said, both in a meeting. I learned to mentor privately and intern publicly, which means if I felt like Brian needed some guidance about how he was leading or running a meeting or thinking about something, I needed to do that one-on-one with him as opposed to in a group of people. The good news is he was so wise at a young age, so open to learning. Our this would not have worked without him being very motivated to learn, and vice versa, me too. Um, but it was an unusual relationship in the sense that I was reporting to someone 21 years younger than me who had no business background. In fact,
Yeah.
Brian
They
is a
were
fortune.
graphic designers, right?
Yeah,
Most of the founders.
Brian
Yeah.
went to the Rhode Island School of Design. He had
Yeah.
no business background, no entrepreneurship background. And he is now for 4 years has been a CEO of a public company, a Fortune 500 CEO, the only Fortune 500 CEO who has a designer or creative background. No
Mm.
one else amongst the Fortune 500 has a background that is not being a lawyer,
Yeah.
somebody who comes from sort of classic business.
Yeah.
And so Brian is a unique character in that, but he has a good business mind. And so I felt like I was teaching him and he was learning and had a big appetite.
And there must have been tensions, I live here in the Bay Area in San Francisco. A lot of times it's a product focus. Everyone focuses on improving the product. There must have been tensions between that and hospitality. I just read the book Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara, a great book, and talked a lot about just, in the hospitality world, just like doing everything you can to please the end consumer or customer. But there must have been tensions at times there where there were debates over, how much effort and energy to put onto the improving the product versus the customer experience.
Yeah, yeah. Ideally, if you're a tech company, you do not, you want to get everybody to your website, and you don't necessarily want to have, human to human contact because that
Right.
costs money.
Right.
And we were doing all kinds of things in real life world where we were creating an Airbnb Open where we had 20,000 hosts from around the world from 110 countries come to Los Angeles and Paris and in San Francisco for these events. So we were really trying to be a hybrid because
Yeah.
what we knew is the soul of the company could not be conveyed purely based upon the website. At the same time, we were a tech company first and foremost, and so the product was really important. I would say where one of the tensions was in the early days is I deeply wanted to focus on quality, and there was a whole growth team within the company whose only responsibility was to
Adding numbers.
add the
Yeah.
number of hosts we
Yeah.
have. We need more
Yeah.
hosts. We need more hosts. And so, me coming in and saying, well, I wasn't using the word friction. I didn't really understand that word until I was in the tech world. To understand friction means you add something that might actually reduce your growth.
Mm.
And so you don't want to do that. But at the same time, if the friction is something that's going to improve quality, in the long run, that could improve growth because it means we have better hosts, and better hosts mean a better experience, which means more guests are going out and saying good things about us. So that kind of philosophical business
Yeah.
question came up a lot, because my point of view was, um, I have to be the Bible thumper when it comes to quality. And that's why you want me here. And the good news is in the long run, I was able to show data, and that's a big thing in a company like Airbnb,
Yeah.
that showed persuasively that our growth was being enhanced by the quality of hosts.
Mm.
So improving the quality of hosts was a really important metric for success for the business.
What about for you personally? You're someone who, when you joined Airbnb, up until that point, your entire career had been focused on hospitality.
Yeah.
And then you join this company that is basically, many have said is disrupting hospitality. Were there peers, old contemporaries of yours in the hospitality world that were like, Chip, what are you doing here? Why are you're like dancing with the devil?
There's a Gandhi quote, which is something like, first they ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they fight you, and then you win.
Hmm.
I used to say that quote in Airbnb a lot when I joined. As like, first they ignore you. That was true. When
Mm.
I joined Airbnb, yes, I was one of the most well-known boutique hoteliers. And everybody thought like, I've never heard of Airbnb. What the hell is that? That doesn't make any sense. Then they ridicule you because actually we started to get on their radar. So I joined in early 2013. By 2014, we were more on the radar. So ridicule started. Then they fight you, and of course that was a big part of the thing. And then you win. And then at the end, when we had our IPO and became the most valuable hospitality company in the world, that was sort of a win. Having said that, I did have some people say you're Darth
Mm.
Vader going to the dark side. And yet most people in the hospitality industry were very curious about what the hell I was doing. And as one of the first boutique hoteliers, which meant I was a disruptor before I was as a boutique hotelier in some ways, I think people were interested to see like why I had chosen to go on this path.
Mm.
In the end, I mean, I feel very redeemed by the fact that the company did as well as it did, and has done as well as it's done. Um, but yeah, there were some who said, like, what are you doing here? And I guess what I would say to some of those people back then was, listen, I joined the hospitality industry as a young entrepreneur who loved hospitality, loved the idea of taking care of people. And I loved the fact that it was an entrepreneurial business. By the time I'd sold my business 24 years later, the entrepreneurship of the business had turned into private equity firms who were coming in and buying and seeing hospitality as another class of real estate. And I felt like we'd lost some of that entrepreneurship. Airbnb is in essence democratizing hospitality and allowing lots of entrepreneurs around the world in 194 countries to learn how to become a hospitality entrepreneur. I'm
Yeah.
going to support that. I'm going now within reason of what needs to be, how we regulate and tax this activity, which I, from the very start, said to the Airbnb founders, dudes, if this continues to be as successful as you are, you have to be regulated, you have to be taxed, because that's the only way you'll ever be legitimate. And so that was a hard one too for them to hear. But ultimately they saw like that was true. And I wasn't always right. I was wrong a lot, but I was right there. And with some in the hospitality business, there were a few people who were like, yeah, they were like nasty to me, but I was invited to hospitality conferences all the time because and I received a lot of resumes from people in the hospitality business who said, Chip, I want to get the kind of stock deal you're getting. Um, so yeah, there was a little bit of envy, I think, as well.
Yeah, that's cool. So what I want to know is, at what point in this journey did you'd been learning, you'd been mentoring, you giving and receiving at Airbnb, and at some point you decide that I want to take this further. You'd done research on aging. You'd realized that there were probably many of your peers that weren't having the same experience as you were. Maybe they were feeling irrelevant at this point in their career and their trajectory. At what point did you decide, this is kind of calling me to create something that's going to help others?
Yeah, to create the world's first midlife wisdom school. I think part of where were the seeds of this? My process in my 50s, my late 40s had been a real struggle for me. I really wanted to sell my company. I unfortunately figured that out during the Great Recession, so that was not the right timing. And I had to sit in my saddle as CEO of that company for 2 years of the Great Recession, and it just
Really
grin.
tough time. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very tough time, running out of cash, etc. So long story short is I'd seen midlife as a crisis. And then I went into my 50s and enjoyed my first 2 years after selling my company, had some space in my life, then joined Airbnb at 52. And I now saw midlife as a chrysalis. Midlife, the chrysalis being that transformational life stage between the caterpillar and the butterfly when you're in a cocoon. And it's like, oh wow. On the other side of the cocoon is that butterfly, and maybe on the other side of me, going through the hard times I went through was like, wow, I feel really great in my 50s. I hadn't heard of something called the U curve of happiness, which shows that 45 to 50 is the low point of adult life satisfaction. And after 50, we get happier and happier with each decade. So as I'm learning about this stuff and making notes about my experience at Airbnb, and by the time I joined Airbnb, I'd written 4 books, I guess. Yeah. And so I think, starting to percolate a book in my brain. And so I spent 4 years full time there, but I didn't want to spend any more full time there. I loved it, but I wanted to spend my last 3.5 years there in a part time role because my original intent in joining Airbnb was to be part time, and it became full time within weeks, just because it was clear they needed me more than I thought.
Hmm.
And long story short is, as I went from full time to part time, I moved down to Baja part time, which is where I am right now, which is where our first MEA campus is. Um, and I started writing this book, Wisdom at Work: The Making of a Modern Elder. As I was writing that book, I came to this conclusion, like, wow, this is interesting. Um, I think there is the opportunity to create a center, a retreat center where people come and spend a week learning how to become a modern elder, learning how to be curious and wise, how to reframe and recast their career, how to learn something new, how to navigate transitions in midlife, how to cultivate purpose, how to actually learn how to cultivate and harvest their wisdom and maybe reframe their relationship with getting older. And all of that led me to creating MEA, the Modern Elder Academy, the world's first midlife wisdom school. Now we have 2 campuses at this point, a beachfront campus here in Baja, and then a 2,600-acre regenerative horse ranch in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So, we have had 6,000 people go through our program and graduate. They're from 60 countries. We have 60 regional chapters around the world. So it's a bit of a movement, and I've loved it, and I've been doing it now for 7 years. And I think if I have one key lesson in this is that our best years may be ahead of us. And as it turns out for me, my 50s were my best year in my career. I'm now 64, and I've enjoyed my 60s as well. But the key is to learn how to shift your mindset from a fixed to a growth mindset in ways that allow new opportunities to have you be open to new opportunities.
And that's easier said than done for someone that's had that fixed mindset for say 30, 40 years. How do you tap into that? Someone who comes to one of your retreats and, has been the way that they have for a long time.
Well, we have them do a little homework before they come, so that's gets them in the right mindset. But we also help them to see the downside of that fixed mindset. First of all, there's all this research that shows that if you shift your mindset about aging from a negative to a positive, which is not easy to do because generally the societal mindset on
Oh, it's
aging is pretty
overwhelmingly negative. Yeah,
negative.
yeah.
So,
Uh-huh.
but if you can shift from negative to positive, you're what and do that in a sustained way, you gain 7.5 years of additional longevity, which is
Wow.
more additional longevity than if you actually stop smoking at 50 or start exercising at 50. So helping people to see like, wow, there's longevity benefit to this.
Hmm.
Helping them to ask the question, 10 years from now, what will I regret if I don't learn it or do it now? And what do I regret that I know now that I wish I had done 10 years ago or learned 10 years ago? These are the kinds of questions that help people to wake up to realize, you know what, I am a little stuck, or I am a little bit bored, or I am a bit bewildered or disillusioned. And I actually, I can't wait around to learn. As I learned when I came to Baja, I was like, okay, I had a fixed mindset that I can't learn Spanish. I'm too old. I'm 56, 57 years old. I can't learn how to surf. But when I put it in the frame of like 10 years from now, what will I regret if I don't learn it or do it now? I'll regret I didn't learn Spanish. I'll regret I didn't learn to surf. And so I started to learn those things. And
Mm.
so we help create a method for people to learn how to become a beginner again.
Mm. I want to ask about your health journey
Yeah.
because around I think a couple of years into running the school, you ended up getting diagnosed with cancer, which you continued to battle.
Yeah.
And you had this just strange confluence of events. You were publishing your book, you were on the Today Show, you're going through chemo, all this was all happening, I think about a year ago now or something like that. So
Yeah, so I had a book called Learning to Love Midlife, 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age come out a year ago. And I by that at that point 2 years ago, so 6 years ago I found out I had, early stage prostate cancer. Didn't worry too much about it. And then it went to second stage and then it went to third stage. And so in preparation for a year ago when the book was coming out, I had a book coming out and a 3-month book tour, including being on the Today Show and Good Morning America on back-to-back days. I had our Santa Fe campus launching during the same time. I was doing a reorg of my company in terms of shifting the leadership team and ultimately elevating our CMO to become CEO. All this was happening at the same time as
jeez.
I'm doing 36 radiation sessions, hormone depletion therapy, such that had virtually no testosterone for 2 years, and two surgeries,
Mm.
ultimately having my prostate taken out. So, yeah, that was a lot. And
Jeez. Yeah.
thank God I meditate because my meditation practice was the thing that grounded me. Thank God I had a lot of good friends and a great team at MEA. Um, and I had just this belief that, you know what, on the other side of this, I can look back on this and I will feel like my painful life lessons will be the raw material for my future wisdom. And I think for all of us, I am just a role model for what happens at MEA as a lot of people come there, limping in, dealing with a divorce, dealing with a business that went down, dealing with, fears of retirement, dealing with parents passing away, empty nest, a health diagnosis. And they're feeling somehow like they're stuck in the chrysalis. They're stuck in the cocoon and they're
Yeah.
never going to get out of it. And I just wanted to use my, unfortunate circumstances as a role model for others to realize I'm going to get to the other side of this. And I have. And yes, I still have cancer inside me. I still have stage 3 cancer in my lymphs. So, I mean, who knows how long I'll live. likely, at least 10 years, probably maybe 20, maybe 30. And what it does is it helps me to, death is a very, exquisite organizing principle for how you live your life. And so I live my life, as Gandhi said, I'm quoting Gandhi twice on this podcast, usual. Live your life as if this year may be your last. Learn as if you're going to live forever, and that's what I've tried to do.
Yeah. I can't help but ask. The title of the book is Learning to Love Midlife 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age. And I read that, and you seem like an overwhelmingly positive guy.
Yeah.
But after that story you just told about the Today Show and all the treatments and all that kind of stuff, is there anything you would have done different, whether it's different title or approached the book any differently, given what you know now?
I mean, I think the book has a pro-aging message to help people understand, like, yes, some things get worse as you get older, but there's a lot of things that get better. So I wouldn't take anything away from that. I think the word midlife scares people.
Hmm.
They hear the word midlife, they think crisis. They don't know what midlife is. In my opinion, midlife is 35 to 75, so it's a very long bridge. Um, so I think midlife sometimes as a word can be frightening. I think the book it became a bestseller, so it clearly,
That
resonated.
word didn't sink it then.
No, yeah. So it resonated with people and it's got a lot of attention. And I would say one area I wish I'd spent more time in the book is how do men versus women deal with midlife. Um, Men's biggest fear in midlife tends to be being on the path to irrelevance. And for women, it's being on the path to invisibility.
Hmm.
And there's slightly different issues there involved in that. And so I do address that in the book, but not as much as I could have. Uh, but yeah, I'm proud of the book. I'll have more books coming out. This is my seventh book, so yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
How did you come up with the curriculum for the academy, for the school? Like, I mean, it's such a broad topic. There's so many different things. And do you
Yeah.
cycle through different curriculums, or do you try and give each group that comes in the same experience?
Each week has a different work. It's a workshop. So there's over the course of we have about 120 workshops a year, and maybe there out of those 120 workshops, about 40 different titles. So there's a lot of different choices. Some of them are the same. So we have navigating transitions and cultivating purpose. Those are two of our most popular workshops and are sort of our baseline. We have something called owning wisdom that's also quite popular. Um, but we have a lot of well-known faculty. Everybody from Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, Dan Buettner, who wrote Blue Zones. Um, we have Arthur Brooks, from Strength to Strength. Blake McCoskey, who started Tom's Shoes. So we have a lot of different faculty members who come and teach with us, and so we have lots of people who come once a year because they're not going to repeat themselves. They're going to
Yeah.
each
Yeah.
workshop has a certain amount of core content of MEA, but also has a slightly different theme or flavor. But we really worked closely with academics at Stanford, Harvard, Yale, and UC Berkeley to help craft the curriculum.
Yeah.
So.
And what does someone like that, who, I guess this question could apply to you as well, but someone who's achieved a lot in their career, what is the selling point for them to come to an academy like that and teach a group of people about what they've learned?
It's interesting because yeah, almost nobody's doing it for the money. Because these are small workshops, usually about
Yeah.
2 dozen
I'm,
people per workshop. I think they're curious. So first of all, our two campuses are in exquisite
beautiful
locations.
places, so that helps.
So yeah, I
Yeah.
like you're getting
Yeah.
free accommodations and great food. We have like people. It's been described as MEA has been described as Four Seasons meets the Blue Zones meets the Esalen Institute, the famous retreat center down
In
in
Big
Big.
Sur. Yeah.
So it's a pretty damn good experience. Um, but I think they're really interested in the topic.
Hmm.
I mean, this idea of longevity, this idea of curiosity, the idea of how do we help people reframe themselves in midlife and beyond, is interesting for some of these people in their own lives. And so they come to it knowing that this is a place where they're going to learn something as well.
Yeah. And one of the most powerful things I saw in one of the presentations you did was that in the last 100 years, we've added 30 years of life expectancy. That is just a monumental shift for the human race in 100 years, such a short period of time.
When we look at like what are the inventions of the 20th century, rarely does someone talk about longevity as being an invention, but it has been an invention. It to have added 3 decades in 1 century means that, retirement all of a sudden became a thing, means that midlife became a thing because midlife didn't really exist prior to, the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. And so we've really completely changed the modern life cycle of how people live their lives. And we have yet to, I think, as a society, help people understand what does that mean for how you're going to operate. Because you're going to probably operate and live your life into your 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s different than your parents or grandparents did. And therefore, we need schools to help people with that. And also, if you think like you're going to fuel up the tank of learning and education at age 18 through 22 in college, and then you're going to drive that tank of gasoline of learning
Right.
the rest of your life, you're going to learn at age 50, you're running on fumes, and the
Yeah.
world has changed a lot. And so you need to refuel. And so MEA is a bit like an educational pit stop for someone in the middle of their life.
Yeah. What if you could wave a magic wand and make any change, whether it's like everyone would go through some kind of, midlife academy type of thing. What kind of changes would help society to prepare for this profound change that we have experienced?
I mean, if I had just one, I could have many, but if I had just one, it would be to culturally shift the norm such that at age 50 or between ages 45 and 50, that we as a society believed that everybody should take a minimum of a 3 month sabbatical.
Like a gap year, but a
Gap year,
quarter.
I'd like it to be a full
Yeah.
year, but
Yeah.
I also want to be recognized that it may not be able to be. So it may be like we have this thing, 529. You're like help to like save it for
Fun
education
for, yeah.
for your kids. Well, how do we help people to do that for themselves?
Yeah.
How do we build that into a career path such that between 45 and 50, you don't feel a little embarrassed that in your resume you took a year off?
Yeah.
No, it's expected. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like in Australia, it's expected when you graduate from college that you're going to go take a gap year and travel around the world. It's part
Yeah.
of culture. So, or in Israel, the culture is you're going to go into the military.
Right.
Everybody does. So I just think that that would be a really helpful thing because it would help people to have the restart button pressed in their life.
Yeah, for sure. Chip, this has been fascinating. I want to wrap with the question that I asked Tony that led me to you, which was who out there, do you admire and respect? Do you have any peers or contemporaries that, you would want to acknowledge and just thank for being there for you throughout your journey, throughout your lifetime, throughout your career?
I mean, Danny Meyer, I will say, is somebody I really admire. He's maybe the best known hospitality person in the world. He wrote a book called Setting the Table, and he's a restaurateur. So I'm a hotelier. So we actually had a nice friendship because we sort of come at things from two different directions in the hospitality business. But he really has, more than anybody else in my industry, helped elevate the conversation to help people to see that hospitality can be offered in any industry. It's a way of being in the world as opposed to an industry. You just go to Cornell to learn the hotel school. So I have a lot of admiration for how he's run his business and grown his company.
And where can people go, Chip, to learn more about you and learn about attending one of the workshops?
Yeah, chipconley.com, or the MEA website is meawisdom.com. And I have a daily blog that you can find at either of those sites called Wisdom Well. That's free, and you get if you sign up for it, you get a free microdose of wisdom every morning from me by email.
Awesome, Chip. Thanks so much.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.